cheating ex tried to steal my $50 million inheritance. She got bullets, fire, and a shallow grave instead. The Montana sky hung low and gray, pressing down on Cormac Mac Calloway like an unwelcome hand on his shoulder. Rain threatened but refused to fall, just as Augustus Calloway had refused to give anything during his life. Now, his father's polished mahogany casket sat before him, waiting to be lowered into the cold ground. Mac stood ramrod straight, his military bearing evident despite the 5 years since his discharge. At 42, his face was weathered, his eyes hard as gunmetal beneath a furrowed brow. He didn't bother to hide his indifference as the preacher droned on about a man he clearly never knew. Next to him, 17-year-old Sable shifted uncomfortably in her black dress. Mac glanced down at his daughter, the only person who mattered in his world, and saw her fighting back tears, not for her grandfather, a man she'd barely met, but for him, for a father having to endure this charade. "You okay?" Mac whispered. Sable nodded, her dark hair falling across her face. "I'm fine. Are you?" Mac didn't answer. The question wasn't worth acknowledging. The small gathering of business associates and distant relatives stood around the grave, their expressions more curious than grieved. Augustus Calloway had been respected for his wealth, feared for his ruthlessness, but loved by no one, especially not his only son. "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust," the preacher concluded, offering the ceremonial dirt to Mac. Mac took the shovel, scooped the earth, and let it fall onto the casket with a hollow thud that echoed his emptiness. He handed the shovel back without a word and turned away. "Aren't we supposed to stay until they lower it?" Sable asked, hurrying to keep pace with his long strides. "He's dead. Doesn't matter anymore." Mac headed toward his truck, a battered black Ford that stood out among the luxury vehicles. "Mr. Calloway." Mac kept walking. "Mr. Calloway, please." He stopped and turned. A balding man in an expensive suit trotted toward them, clutching a leather portfolio to his chest. "Mr. Jenkins," Mac said flatly, recognizing his father's attorney. "The reading of the will is scheduled for 4 today," Jenkins said, slightly out of breath. "Your father was most insistent that you attend." Mac checked his watch. 2 hours from now. "Fine." Jenkins blinked, surprised by the easy acquiescence. "Excellent. My office downtown. You know the address?" "I remember." The attorney hesitated. "Your father left specific instructions." "I don't care," Mac cut him off. "I'll be there. That's all you need to know." Jenkins backed away, nodding. "Yes, of course. My condolences again." Mac watched him retreat before continuing to the truck. Sable climbed in without a word, knowing better than to push conversation when her father got like this. The old truck roared to life, and they pulled away from the cemetery, leaving Augustus Calloway and his legacy behind, or so Mac thought. Jenkins' office was all polished wood and leather, reeking of money and pretension. Mac sat stiffly in a high-backed chair, Sable beside him. The attorney adjusted his glasses and carefully opened Augustus's will. "As per Mr. Calloway's instructions, this reading is private and limited to family members only." Jenkins glanced at the empty chairs around them. "Which, it seems, is just the two of you." Mac said nothing. His father had outlived 2 wives and alienated every other relative. "Shall we begin?" Jenkins cleared his throat. "I, Augustus William Calloway, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The legal jargon washed over Mac like white noise. He tuned it out until Jenkins' voice suddenly sharpened. "To my son, Cormac William Calloway, I leave my entire estate, including all properties, businesses, investments, and liquid assets, currently valued at approximately $50 million. Mac blinked. Sable gasped beside him. "This inheritance comes with no conditions or stipulations," Jenkins continued. "Cormac has always done as he pleased, regardless of my wishes. I see no reason to attempt to control him from the grave." Jenkins looked up. "There's more, but that's the essence of it. You are the sole heir, Mr. Calloway." Mac stared at the attorney, unable to process what he'd just heard. $50 million, his father's entire fortune. "There must be a mistake," he finally said. Jenkins shook his head. "There's no mistake. Everything your father owned now belongs to you." "Why?" The question escaped before Mac could stop it. "He didn't share his reasoning with me," Jenkins replied, "but the will is ironclad." Mac stood abruptly. "How soon can the transfer be completed?" "The paperwork is already prepared. Once probate clears, which your father made arrangements to expedite, the assets will be yours. A month, perhaps less." Mac nodded. "Send everything to my ranch, and your bill." "Dad," Sable said, her voice small, "are you okay?" "Let's go," he replied, ignoring the question. Outside, in the truck, Mac gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. $50 million, a fortune built on cutthroat business practices, on destroying lives, on breaking spirits, including his own. Dad, Sable tried again, what are you going to do with all that money? Mac started the engine. Secure your future, but what about you? Mac pulled out onto the street. I don't need anything. Grandpa left you everything, she pressed. Doesn't that mean something? It means he's playing games, even from the grave. Mac's voice hardened. Augustus never gave without expecting something in return. I don't understand. Mac glanced at his daughter, so young, so innocent, despite the hardships she'd already faced. He's mocking me, giving me what he knows I never wanted. But why not just enjoy it? Use it for something good? Mac's expression softened slightly. That's what I intend to do. For you. The rest of the drive passed in silence. Mac's mind churned with memories of belt lashings disguised as discipline, of coldness masquerading as strength, of a childhood spent trying to earn love that never came. Now, in death, Augustus had given him everything except the one thing Mac had ever wanted from him. As they approached the ranch, Sable finally spoke again. I think I'm going to hang out with Lyndon tonight, clear my head. Mac nodded. Be back by 10. Dad, I'm 17. 10, he repeated, his tone brooking no argument. Sable sighed, but didn't protest further. She knew the boundaries, knew the reasons behind his protectiveness. Her mother had taught them both painful lessons about trust. The ranch came into view, 20 acres of land surrounded by a heavy fence, security cameras at strategic points. The house itself was built like a fortress. Mac had designed it that way after Anessa left, after the threat started, a place where he could keep Sable safe. He parked in front of the house and killed the engine. Go change. I'll make dinner before you head out. Sable hesitated, then leaned over and hugged him awkwardly. I love you, Dad. Mac stiffened, then returned the embrace briefly. Love you too, kid. He watched her go inside, then sat in the truck a moment longer, staring at nothing. $50 million wouldn't change who he was. Nothing could do that. But it might change what he could do for Sable, college without debt, a future without limits. For that, he would accept Augustus's blood money. But he would never forget what it had cost. Night fell over the ranch, bringing with it a bitter wind that rattled the windows. Mac sat in his study, a glass of whiskey untouched before him, staring at the documents Jenkins had given him. Property deeds, stock certificates, bank accounts, a paper trail of Augustus's empire. The security system chimed, alerting him to a vehicle approaching the gate. Mac frowned, checking his watch. Too early for Sable to be home. He pulled up the security feed on his laptop. A sleek black SUV idled at the gate, headlights cutting through the darkness. Mac zoomed in on the driver's window as it rolled down, his stomach clenched. Anessa. 5 years since he'd last seen her, since the divorce that had nearly destroyed him. Her hair was different, shorter, dyed platinum blonde, but her face was the same, beautiful and cold. The passenger door opened, and a man stepped out. Tall, muscular, with a shaved head and a jagged scar running down one cheek. Mac recognized him immediately. Bryson Cade, the ex-con Anessa had left him for after his last deployment. But they weren't alone. The back doors opened, and 3 more men emerged, hard-looking individuals with the unmistakable bearing of criminals. Mac reached for his phone, hesitated, then set it down. No point calling the sheriff. In a town this small, word of Augustus's death and the inheritance had undoubtedly spread. Anessa's timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Mac walked to the front door, grabbing his jacket. A Glock 19 sat in the safe by the entrance. Mac punched in the code, removed the weapon, and tucked it into his waistband at the small of his back. Then he headed out to meet his past. The ranch's floodlights illuminated the scene as Mac approached the gate. Anessa stood with her arms crossed, Bryson looming beside her, the 3 men spread out behind them, a show of force. Mac stopped several feet from the gate, just out of reach. Anessa, Mac said, his voice steady. Mac, she replied, her tone honey over ice. You're looking well, what do you want? She smiled, all teeth and no warmth. I heard about Augustus. My condolences. Bullshit. What do you want? Is that any way to greet your wife? Ex-wife, Mac corrected. The papers were finalized 5 years ago. Anessa's smile faltered. Yes, well, about that. I've been reviewing our divorce settlement, and I feel it was inequitable. Mac almost laughed. You got exactly what you asked for. Everything? That was before I knew about Augustus's fortune. She took a step closer to the gate. Half of that money is rightfully mine, Mac. Now he did laugh, a harsh sound devoid of humor. You're out of your mind. Bryson moved forward, hands curling into fists. Watch how you talk to her. Mac ignored him, keeping his eyes on Anessa. We were divorced long before my father died. You have no claim to anything. Montana is an equitable distribution state, she said, as if reciting a memorized line. Assets acquired during marriage, or with the potential to be acquired based on actions during marriage. Save the legal bullshit for someone who cares. Mac cut her off. You're not getting a dime. Anessa's facade cracked slightly, her eyes narrowing. You always were stubborn, Mac. It's why we never worked. We never worked because you were sleeping with half of Billings while I was deployed. Bryson surged forward, grabbing the gate. You son of a... Easy, one of the men behind him said, putting a hand on his shoulder. This man was different, calmer, better dressed, with an air of authority. We're just having a conversation. Mac assessed him quickly. Mid-40s, expensive watch, the confidence of someone used to being in charge. Dangerous. And you are? Mac asked. Call me Finn, the man offered, a thin smile on his lips. A business associate of your ex-wife's. What kind of business? The lucrative kind. Finn's smile didn't reach his eyes. Miss Vaughn has retained our services to help resolve this unfortunate dispute. Mac understood immediately. The Blood Crows. He'd heard whispers about them. A Denver-based gang expanding their territory into Montana, dealing in everything from drugs to murder for hire. And now Anessa was involved with them. There's no dispute, Mac said evenly, just trespassing on private property. Anessa stepped forward again, placing her manicured hands on the gate. 25 million, Mac. That's all I'm asking. Half of what's rightfully mine. Turn around, Anessa. You're wasting your time. Her expression hardened. That's where you're wrong, Mac. This is my time now. Mac reached over and hit the control panel. The gate slid shut in her face, locking with a metallic click. For a moment, he expected rage, screaming, threats, the Anessa he remembered from their worst fights. Instead, she simply smiled. That smile chilled him more than any outburst could have. We'll be in touch, she said, turning back to the SUV. Finn lingered a moment longer, his eyes measuring Mac. Consider her offer, Mr. Calloway. It would be the sensible thing to do. Get off my property, Mac replied. Finn nodded, as if Mac had confirmed something for him, then followed Anessa and the others to the vehicle. Mac watched them drive away, his hand resting on the Glock at his back. Something had changed in Anessa. The woman he married had been manipulative, selfish, even cruel, but this calculated coldness was new and far more dangerous. Back inside, Mac poured himself another whiskey and drank it in one swallow. The burn in his throat was nothing compared to the acid churning in his gut. Anessa's reappearance, the Blood Crow's involvement, it complicated everything. His phone rang. Sable. What's up? He answered, trying to keep his voice normal. Is it okay if I stay out a little later? Lyndon and I are going to catch a movie. Mac checked his watch. 8:30. Be home by 11, no later. Thanks, Dad. Love you. Love you too. Be careful. Mac hung up, debating whether to tell Sable about Anessa's visit. No, he decided. No need to worry her yet. He'd handle this himself. Mac walked to the window, staring out at the darkness beyond the security lights. Anessa wouldn't give up easily. She never had. But neither would he, not when it came to protecting what was his. Augustus's money meant nothing to him, but it meant everything to Anessa, and that gave him leverage. If she wanted a war, he'd give her one. This time, he'd make sure she lost everything. Sable checked her phone as she and Lyndon left the movie theater, 10:15 p.m. She had time to grab a quick bite at Dino's diner before heading home. Your dad's still being super strict, huh? Lyndon asked, pulling her jacket tighter against the cold. He has his reasons. Sable shrugged, unwilling to explain the complicated history behind her father's protectiveness. Come on, you're practically an adult. Doesn't he trust you? It's not about trusting me. Sable led the way toward the diner, its neon sign casting pink and blue light onto the sidewalk. It's about not trusting everyone else. Lyndon rolled her eyes. This town is like the most boring place on earth. What does he think is going to happen? Sable bit her lip, remembering the day her mother had left, the screaming, the threats, the restraining order that came later. It's complicated. Inside Dino's, they slid into a booth by the window. The diner was nearly empty, just a couple of truckers at the counter and an elderly couple in the corner. So Lyndon leaned forward, eyes bright with curiosity. Is it true about your grandpa leaving you guys a ton of money? Sable hesitated. News traveled fast in Billings. Where did you hear that? My dad works at the bank. He said Mr. Jenkins was talking about it. $50 million. Is that for real? I don't know the exact amount, Sable said uncomfortably, but yeah, my dad inherited everything. Holy shit, you're going to be like the richest kid in school. It doesn't matter. Nothing's going to change. Lyndon laughed. Are you kidding? Everything's going to change. You could buy a new car, new clothes. Hell, you could buy the school if you want. It's not my money. It's my dad's, Sable said, picking at her napkin. And he doesn't care about that stuff. Well, what about college? You've always wanted to go to NYU, right? Now you totally can. Sable smiled slightly at that. Yeah, I guess that part is cool. They ordered burgers and shakes, the conversation drifting to school gossip and plans for the upcoming weekend. By the time they finished eating, it was 10:45. "I better get going," Sable said, leaving cash on the table. "Dad will freak if I'm late." "Want me to walk you to your truck?" Lyndon offered. "Nah, it's just across the street. I'll text you tomorrow." They hugged goodbye, and Sable stepped out into the night. The temperature had dropped further, the wind biting through her jacket. She hurried across the street toward the small lot where she'd parked her pickup. The lot was poorly lit, most of the street lamps either broken or dim. Sable fished her keys from her pocket, quickening her pace. Something about the shadows between the parked cars made her uneasy. She was halfway to her truck when she heard footsteps behind her. Sable Calloway? She turned. A man she'd never seen before stood a few feet away, tall, wiry, with a tattoo creeping up his neck. "Who's asking?" she said, taking a step back, suddenly aware of how isolated the parking lot was. The man smiled, revealing a gold tooth. "Got a message for your daddy." Before Sable could react, someone grabbed her from behind, a hand clamping over her mouth. She tried to scream, to fight, but another figure appeared, then another. "Bring her," a female voice said. Sable's blood ran cold. She knew that voice. They dragged her into the alley beside the parking lot, 3 men holding her while she kicked and struggled. A black SUV was parked at the alley's end, its engine running. "Hello, stepdaughter," Anessa said, stepping into the dim light, her face a mask of cold fury. Sable stopped struggling, shock momentarily overriding fear. "What are you doing here? Teaching your father a lesson in cooperation." Anessa nodded to one of the men. "Bryson, show her what happens when Max says no to me." The largest man stepped forward, shaved head, scarred face, eyes like empty holes. Sable recognized him from pictures, from her mother's social media before her dad had made her block everything. "Please," Sable whispered, "I haven't done anything to you." "No," Bryson agreed, his voice surprisingly soft, "but your father has." His fist drove into her stomach with such force that Sable doubled over, unable to breathe. Pain exploded through her, and she would have collapsed if not for the men holding her arms. Again, Anessa commanded. Another blow, this time to her ribs. Something cracked. Sable's vision swam, black spots dancing at the edges. "The old man leaving everything to Mac wasn't part of the plan," Anessa said conversationally, watching as Sable gasped for air. "I was counting on that money, Sable. Do you know what it's like to count on something, only to have it ripped away?" Sable couldn't answer, couldn't breathe, couldn't think through the pain. "Hold her up," Bryson said to the others. They yanked her upright. Sable's head lolled forward, a strand of bloody saliva hanging from her mouth. "Your daddy thinks he can shut me out." Anessa crouched down, forcing Sable to look at her. "That he can keep what's rightfully mine, but he forgets what I'm capable of." "He'll kill you for this," Sable managed, each word in agony. Anessa laughed. "He can try, but first he'll pay me what I'm owed." She stood, brushing imaginary dirt from her designer pants. "Make sure she remembers this night." One of the men, younger, with a wispy beard and nervous eyes, laughed. "How much are we supposed to fuck her up, boss?" The third man, who'd remained silent until now, answered, "Enough to send a message, Ski. Not enough to kill her." But Bryson wasn't listening. He drove his fist into Sable's face. Her nose shattered, blood spurting across her chin and neck. She tried to scream, but only a gurgle emerged. "That's enough," the third man said sharply. "Not yet." Bryson hit her again, this time in the ribs where they had already cracked. Sable vomited, the contents of her dinner spattering the alley floor. "God damn, that's nasty," Ski laughed, jumping back to avoid the splash. "I said enough." The third man grabbed Bryson's arm. "Finn wants her alive." Bryson shook him off. "One more." He leaned close to Sable, his breath hot on her bleeding face. "Tell your daddy this is just the beginning." He stepped back and kicked her square in the face with his steel-toed boot. Sable's world exploded into white-hot pain, then darkness began to creep in from the edges. She felt herself falling, the men releasing her arms. The cold concrete pressed against her cheek. Through a haze of pain and encroaching unconsciousness, she heard Anessa's voice. "Tell your daddy to give me my half, or next time we won't stop." The last thing Sable saw was Bryson's boot coming toward her face again. Then, nothing. Mac paced the living room, checking his watch for the dozenth time, 11:30 p.m. Sable was never late, not without calling. He tried her cell 3 times, straight to voicemail. He tried Lyndon's number next. The girl answered on the second ring, her voice sleepy. "Mr. Calloway, what's wrong? Is Sable with you?" "No, she left Dino's around 10:45 to head home." Mac's grip tightened on the phone. "She never made it." "What?" "But her truck. I'm going to look for her. If she contacts you, call me immediately." Mac hung up and grabbed his keys, a cold dread settling in his gut. He knew, with the certainty of a man who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer, that Anessa was behind this. He barely reached his truck when his phone rang, an unknown number. "Calloway," he answered, his voice tight. "Is this the father of Sable Calloway?" A woman's voice, professional, unfamiliar. Yes. Who is this? This is Nurse Matthews at Billings Memorial Hospital. Your daughter has been admitted to the emergency room. She was found unconscious in an alley downtown. The world seemed to tilt beneath Mac's feet. Is she? She's in critical condition, Mr. Calloway. You should come right away. Mac didn't remember the drive to the hospital. One moment he was in his truck, the next he was running through the emergency room doors, demanding to see his daughter. Sir, you need to calm down, a security guard warned, stepping into his path. My daughter, Sable Calloway, where is she? A nurse appeared, her face grave. Mr. Calloway, come with me, please. She led him through double doors into the trauma ward. The antiseptic smell, the beeping monitors, the hushed voices. It all faded away when Mac saw the figure in the bed. If not for the dark hair, he wouldn't have recognized her. Sable's face was swollen beyond recognition, a maze of purple bruises and split skin. Tubes ran from her arms, her nose, her mouth, a ventilator hissed rhythmically. Jesus Christ, Mac whispered, his knees nearly buckling. She has multiple broken ribs, a punctured lung, internal bleeding, and a severe concussion, the doctor explained, appearing at his side. We've stabilized her for now, but she's not out of danger. Who found her? A couple leaving the movie theater. They called 911. Mac approached the bed slowly, afraid to touch her, afraid he might somehow cause more damage. Sable looked so small, so broken, his little girl. We've notified the police, the doctor continued. They'll want to speak with you when you're ready. Mac nodded mechanically, not taking his eyes off Sable. Can I have a minute alone with her? Of course. When the room cleared, Mac sank into the chair beside the bed. His hand hovered over Sable's, hesitating before gently taking it. Her skin was cold. I'm here, baby girl, he whispered. I'm right here. She didn't stir, only the steady beep of the heart monitor answered him. Mac's vision blurred with tears he refused to shed. Tears wouldn't help Sable. Tears wouldn't punish those responsible. But he knew who had done this, knew why. And in that moment, something fundamental shifted inside him. A line crossed, a decision made. Mac leaned forward, pressing his lips to Sable's forehead. I promise you, Sable, he whispered against her skin. They will all burn. Mac hadn't moved from Sable's bedside in 36 hours. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting IVs, speaking in hushed tones as if their words might shatter what little peace remained in the sterile room. He sat rigid in the uncomfortable chair, eyes fixed on the broken form of his daughter, listening to the steady beep of machines keeping track of her life. A doctor entered, different from the one who had been there when Mac arrived, younger, with tired eyes and a clipboard clutched to his chest. Mr. Calloway, I'm Dr. Reeves. I've been monitoring your daughter's condition. Mac didn't look up. Any change? Her vitals have stabilized, Dr. Reeves said, moving to the opposite side of the bed. The swelling in her brain has begun to subside, which is a good sign. When will she wake up? The doctor hesitated. It's difficult to say. The trauma was significant. Now Mac looked up, his eyes boring into the doctor's. That's not an answer. The next 24 hours will be critical, Dr. Reeves said, meeting Mac's gaze with practiced calm. If she regains consciousness during that window, her chances improve dramatically. And if she doesn't, let's not get ahead of ourselves. The doctor checked the monitors, made a notation on his clipboard. The human body is remarkably resilient, Mr. Calloway, especially in someone young and healthy like your daughter. Mac's jaw tightened. She's 17. I know, Dr. Reeves's voice softened. The police detective asked to speak with you when you're ready. He's been waiting. I've got nothing to say to the police. They need your statement to investigate. I know who did this, Mac interrupted, his voice flat. And no badge is going to bring them to justice. The doctor tensed. Mr. Calloway, I understand you're upset, but you don't understand. Mac stood, towering over the younger man. You patch up the results. You don't deal with the causes. That's not fair. Life's not fair. Mac turned back to Sable, effectively dismissing the doctor. Tell the detective I'm staying with my daughter. Dr. Reeves sighed but nodded. I'll let him know. Try to get some rest, Mr. Calloway. She'll need you at your best when she wakes up. The door closed quietly behind him. Mac sank back into the chair, rubbing a hand over his face. The stubble had grown into the beginnings of a beard, rough under his palm. He couldn't remember the last time he'd slept or eaten. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered except Sable and retribution. A soft knock at the door made him look up. A nurse entered, different from the previous shift. I brought you some coffee, she said, offering a steaming cup. Black, right? Mac nodded, accepting it without thanks. The nurse didn't seem to mind, her attention already on Sable. Poor thing, she murmured, checking the fourth. What kind of monsters would do this to a child? Mac didn't answer. He knew the kind of monsters who followed Anessa, the kind who beat a teenage girl half to death to send a message. The nurse finished her checks and left. Mac sipped the bitter coffee, his mind running through scenarios, plans, contingencies. He needed weapons, information, a starting point. A slight movement caught his eye, Sable's fingers twitching against the white sheet. Mac set the coffee down hard, spilling it across the side table. "Sable," he whispered, taking her hand. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. Her fingers tightened weakly around his. "Nurse!" Mac shouted, not taking his eyes off his daughter. "Someone get in here!" The same nurse rushed in, followed by Dr. Reeves, who must have been nearby. "She moved," Mac said, his voice cracking. "She squeezed my hand." Dr. Reeves moved to the bed, pulling a penlight from his pocket. He gently lifted one of Sable's swollen eyelids, shining the light briefly. "Pupillary response is good." He repeated the process with the other eye. "Sable, can you hear me? If you can hear me, squeeze your father's hand again." Mac held his breath. 1 second passed, 2, 3, then, unmistakably, Sable's fingers tightened around his. "That's it," Dr. Reeves encouraged. "You're doing great, Sable. Can you try to open your eyes for us?" Her face contorted with effort, the bruises shifting grotesquely, but slowly, painfully, her eyes opened. Just a slit through the swelling, but open. "Dad," the word was barely audible, slurred through broken lips. "I'm here, baby." Mac leaned closer, his vision blurring with unshed tears. "I'm right here." "Hurts," she whispered. "I know. We'll get you something for the pain." Mac looked up at the nurse, who was already adjusting the fourth. "This will help," she assured them both. "She'll feel better soon." Dr. Reeves performed a quick assessment, checking responses and vitals. "This is a very good sign, Mr. Calloway. I'll order another CT scan to make sure the swelling continues to decrease, but her waking up this soon is extremely encouraging." Mac barely heard him, focused entirely on Sable, whose eyes kept drifting back to his face despite the obvious effort it took to keep them open. "Don't try to talk," he told her. "Just rest. You're going to be okay." Sable's lips moved again, so faintly he had to lean closer to hear. "Mom," she whispered. It was Mom. Mac's blood ran cold. He'd known, of course, but hearing it confirmed, hearing that Sable had seen Anessa during the attack, sent a wave of rage through him so powerful it nearly took his breath away. "I know," he said quietly. "Don't worry about that now." Tears leaked from the corners of Sable's eyes, mixing with the bruises. Why would she do this? Mac had no answer that would make sense to his daughter, no explanation that could possibly justify what had been done to her. "She's sick," he said finally, "in ways I can't explain, but she won't hurt you again. I promise." The doctor and nurse exchanged glances. Mac ignored them. Let them think what they wanted. Let them call the police. It wouldn't change what was coming. "The medicine is starting to work," the nurse observed as Sable's eyes began to drift closed again. "She needs rest now." Mac nodded, still holding his daughter's hand. "I'll be right here when you wake up," he promised. But as Sable slipped back into sleep, Mac knew he wouldn't be. He had work to do, a war to start. The doctor and nurse left after a few more minutes of observation. Mac waited until Sable's breathing evened out, then gently laid her hand back on the bed. He stood, looking down at her battered face. In his time as a Marine, Mac had seen what humans could do to each other, had done things himself that would haunt a lesser man, but nothing had prepared him for seeing his own child like this. Nothing had forged his resolve like this moment. He leaned down and kissed Sable's forehead. "I promise you, Sable," he whispered against her skin, "they will all burn." Mac straightened, a deadly calm settling over him. He wouldn't be calling the police, wouldn't be making statements or filing reports. Justice wouldn't come from a courthouse. It would come from the barrel of a gun. Mac drove back to the ranch under a sky heavy with unshed rain. The air smelled of ozone and wet earth, the promise of a storm matching his mood. He needed a shower, a change of clothes, and his weapons. Then he would begin hunting. The security system chimed as he approached the gate. Mac frowned. Who would be waiting for him here? He pulled up the camera feed on his phone. A Billings County Sheriff's Department cruiser idled at the entrance, Sheriff Tobias Griggs himself sitting behind the wheel. Mac's eyes narrowed. The timing was too convenient. Sable wakes up, mentions Anessa, and suddenly the sheriff appears at his door. If there was one thing Mac had learned in combat, it was that there were no coincidences in war. He pulled up to the gate and rolled down his window. Sheriff Griggs nodded, his jowly face attempting a solemn expression. "Mac, heard about Sable. Terrible thing. What do you want? Just checking in. Thought you might have some idea who did this." Mac studied the man's face. Griggs had been sheriff for 15 years, running unopposed in the last 3 elections. A good old boy who knew everyone's business and made sure things ran smoothly, or so Mac had always thought. "Why would I know something the police don't?" Mac asked carefully. Griggs shrugged. "Just figured, what with your ex-wife showing up in town right before this happened, it might be connected." Mac didn't react. "You've seen Anessa?" Word gets around. Griggs shifted in his seat. Mind if I come in? Rather not have this conversation through car windows. After a moment's hesitation, Mac opened the gate. He led the sheriff to the house, watching the man's eyes scan the property, noting defenses, escape routes, not the behavior of someone making a simple condolence call. Inside, Mac didn't offer coffee or a seat. He stood in the center of the living room, arms crossed. Talk. Griggs removed his hat, turning it in his hands. Like I said, just checking in. Sable's a good kid. Whoever did this needs to face justice. And you're here to make sure that happens? Mac's voice was acid. It's my job. Your job, Mac repeated slowly. Funny how your job didn't include keeping the blood crows out of Billings. Griggs's eyes widened slightly before he controlled his expression. Don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. Mac took a step closer. I think you know exactly who they are and what they're doing here. I think you know they're working with my ex-wife. And I think you're getting paid to look the other way. That's a serious accusation, Mac, Griggs said, his hand drifting toward his holster. The kind that could get a man in trouble. Trouble? Mac laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. My daughter is lying in a hospital bed, beaten half to death, and you're talking to me about trouble? I'm sorry about Sable. Truly I am, but whatever you're thinking of doing, don't. Griggs's voice hardened. Let the law handle this. The law? Mac moved so quickly Griggs had no time to react. He grabbed the sheriff by the throat and slammed him against the wall. You mean you? The man on Inessa's payroll? I don't... Griggs choked as Mac's grip tightened. Don't lie to me, Mac hissed. I saw you meeting with Calder Finn at the West Side Motel 2 days ago, right after Inessa showed up at my gate. It was a bluff, but Griggs's panicked expression confirmed Mac had guessed right. It's not what you think, Griggs gasped. They approached me, threatened my family. Save it. Mac released the sheriff, who slumped against the wall, coughing. How much are they paying you? Griggs rubbed his throat, eyes darting to the door. $10,000 a month to look the other way while they set up shop. And what did Inessa offer for dealing with me? The sheriff paled. Nothing, I swear. Mac moved in again, grabbing Griggs by the front of his uniform and dragging him across the room to his desk. He slammed the man's head down onto the polished wood surface with enough force to split the skin across his nose. Blood sprayed across the papers. Tell me the truth, Mac demanded, keeping the sheriff's face pressed to the desk. 50,000, Griggs blurted, blood bubbling from his nostrils, to find something on you, get you locked up so she could file for custody of Sable. Mac's grip tightened, his knuckles white against Griggs's uniform. And when that didn't work out, they decided to beat her instead? I didn't know they'd hurt the girl, I swear to God. Mac pulled Griggs's head back and slammed it down again. The sheriff's nose broke with a wet crunch. God's not listening right now, Mac said, but I am. Tell me where they're operating from. I can't. They'll kill me. I'll kill you if you don't, Mac countered, his voice calm. And I'll take my time. Griggs must have believed him because he started talking. Old mining camp near the Beartooth foothills. Finn bought it through a shell company. They've got maybe 20 men up there, heavily armed, running drugs in from Canada, distributing throughout Montana and Wyoming. And Inessa? Staying at the compound with Finn. They're together. Mac absorbed this, his rage settling into something colder, more focused. Who else is on their payroll besides you? 2 of my deputies, the fire marshal, a judge. Griggs moaned as blood continued to pour from his shattered nose. Please, Mac, I got a family. So do I. Mac pulled the sheriff upright, staring into his bloodied face. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pretend you never came here, never saw me, never had this conversation. What are you going to do? You don't want to know. Mac wiped his bloody hand on Griggs's uniform. But if anyone comes asking questions about me or looking for me, you're going to be absolutely useless to them. Understand? Griggs nodded, his eyes wide with terror. If I find out you warned them I'm coming, I'll make sure your wife and kids get to watch what I do to you. Are we clear? We're clear, Griggs whispered, blood dripping from his chin. You're going to pretend you never saw me coming. Good. Mac released him, and the sheriff stumbled back, clutching his broken nose. Now get out of my house. Griggs fled without another word, leaving a trail of blood drops on the hardwood floor. Mac watched through the window as the sheriff's cruiser sped away, gravel spraying from the tires. He'd bought himself some time, but not much. Griggs couldn't be trusted. The man was a coward who'd sell out anyone to save his own skin. Which meant Mac needed to move fast. He walked to the gun safe in his bedroom, punched in the code, and began removing weapons. A Remington 700 sniper rifle, his service pistol, a combat shotgun, ammunition for each. He laid them on the bed, then added a tactical vest, night vision goggles, and his old Marine combat knife. Next, he went to his study, where he pulled up maps of the area on his computer. The Beartooth foothills covered hundreds of square miles, but old mining claims were a matter of public record. It didn't take long to identify several possibilities, and even less time to narrow it down based on access roads and isolation. His phone rang. The hospital. Mac answered immediately. "Mr. Calloway, this is Nurse Winters. Your daughter is asking for you. How is she?" "Stable. The doctor is pleased with her progress. She's in some pain, but that's to be expected. Tell her I'll be there soon." Mac ended the call. He wouldn't lie to Sable, but he wouldn't tell her everything either, not yet, not until it was over. Mac gathered what he needed, loading it into his truck. One more stop before the hospital. He needed to find the weakest link in the Blood Crow's chain, and he knew exactly where to start. The sun had set by the time Mac reached the eastern outskirts of Billings, where ramshackle houses and trailer parks gave way to abandoned industrial lots. This was where the city's forgotten lived, the addicts, the drifters, the criminals too small time to afford anything better. Mac parked his truck behind a defunct gas station and continued on foot, a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He wore a nondescript jacket over his shirt, the Glock concealed at his waistband. Nothing about him screamed ex-Marine on a revenge mission. The dealer had told him Ski would be at a place the locals called the Tin Shack, a dilapidated ranch house with aluminum siding that glinted dully under the streetlights. 3 rusted cars sat in the dirt yard, and the windows glowed with the sickly blue light of television screens. Mac circled the property once, noting exits, the number of people inside based on shadows and voices. 4, maybe 5. One of them would be Ski, the man who had laughed while his daughter vomited blood. He waited in the shadows of a dead elm tree, watching as 2 men stumbled out the front door, arguing loudly about money and drugs. Neither matched the description he'd gotten of Ski. They climbed into one of the cars and drove off, leaving 3 inside at most. Mac approached the back of the house, silent despite his size. A window was cracked open, voices drifting out. "Finn's gonna be pissed you skimmed that much," a woman said, her voice raspy from cigarettes or meth or both. "Finn can suck my dick," a male voice replied. "Young, cocky. I did the job. I deserve a bonus." "Beating up some teenage girl?" The woman laughed. "Real tough guy, Ski." Mac's hand tightened on the Glock, target confirmed. "You should have seen her face when Bryson started in on her," Ski continued, crying for her daddy. Pathetic. Mac had heard enough. He moved to the back door, tested the handle, unlocked. These people felt safe in their squalor, protected by Finn's reputation. He entered silently, finding himself in a filthy kitchen. The stench of chemicals and unwashed bodies hit him like a wall. Through a beaded curtain, he could see into the living room where the voices came from. Ski sat on a torn couch, rail thin, with stringy hair and tattoos crawling up his neck. A pipe was in his hand, smoke curling around his face. The woman sat across from him, her back to Mac, equally thin and dirty. "Someone else is here," a third voice said, male, deeper, from somewhere Mac couldn't see. Mac stepped through the beaded curtain, gun raised. "Nobody move." The woman screamed. Ski froze, the pipe halfway to his mouth. The third person, a heavy-set man with a patchy beard, emerged from a hallway reaching behind his back. "Touch that gun and you die first," Mac said calmly. The man stopped, hands raising slowly. "Who the fuck are you?" Ski demanded, eyes wide, pupils dilated. "The father of the girl you helped beat half to death." Recognition dawned on Ski's face, followed by fear. "Fuck, man, that wasn't personal. Just business." "This isn't personal either," Mac replied. "It's war." He shot the heavy-set man in the knee. The crack of the Glock was deafening in the small room. The man went down screaming, clutching his shattered joint. The woman bolted for the door. Mac let her go. She wasn't his target. Jesus Christ. Ski tried to stand, but Mac was across the room in 2 strides. The barrel of the Glock pressed against his forehead. "Sit." Ski sat. "Please, man, I was just following orders. Finn and that lady, they said. I don't care what they said." Mac grabbed Ski by the throat, dragging him off the couch and throwing him into a wooden chair. "You hurt my daughter. You laughed while she was beaten." "I didn't." Mac backhanded him, splitting his lip. "Lie to me again, and I'll shoot off your kneecaps, too." Mac glanced at the wounded man, who was still howling in pain. "Shut up, or you're next." The man bit down on his screams, reduced to whimpering. Mac turned back to Ski. "Where's Anessa?" The back of Mac's hand cracked across Ski's face again, splitting his lip further. "My ex-wife. Blonde, cold, working with Finn." "The boss lady?" "She's at the compound, man, with Finn. Where's the compound?" Ski hesitated. Mac pressed the gun under his chin. "The old Blackburn mine," Ski blurted, "off Route 78 near Red Lodge. How many men?" "I don't know. 15, 20. They rotate through." Mac studied Ski's face. He was telling the truth, but it wasn't enough. What's their security like? Guards at the entrance, dogs patrolling the perimeter. Finn's got snipers in the hills during the day, and at night fewer men, but the dogs are worse. They're trained to kill. Mac nodded. Who else was there when my daughter was beaten? Just me, Bryson, and Vance. And your ex. Vance? Finn's second in command, Cole Bastard. He's the one who said to stop. Mac filed the name away. And Bryson, where is he now? At the compound. He never leaves Finn's side. Is my daughter the first person you've helped hurt? Ski swallowed hard. No. How many others? I don't know, man, a dozen. Finn uses us to send messages. Mac's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a zip tie, hands behind the chair. Wait, please, Ski begged. I told you what you wanted, and now you're going to tell me more. Mac forced Ski's hands behind the chair and secured them with the zip tie. He pulled out his combat knife, the blade catching the dim light. Everything about the compound, every entrance, every guard position, every weakness. Ski stared at the knife, trembling. They'll kill me if I tell you that. I'll kill you if you don't, Mac countered, and I'll take my time. For a moment, Ski seemed to weigh his options, calculating his chances. Then he started laughing. A high, manic sound. You're dead anyway, man. You go against Finn, you're dead. You, your daughter, everyone you care about. Mac didn't respond to the outburst. Instead, he stepped forward and, with a quick, practiced motion, sliced off Ski's left pinky finger. The laughter transformed into a scream. Blood spurted from the wound, spattering across Ski's jeans and the dirty carpet. That's one, Mac said calmly. I've got 9 more fingers to go through before I start on other parts. Or you can tell me what I need to know. You're crazy, Ski shrieked, staring at his maimed hand in horror. No. Mac moved the knife to Ski's ring finger. I'm at war, and in war, there are casualties. The knife began to press down. Ski broke. Wait, I'll tell you everything. And he did. Over the next hour, in between sobs and pleas, Ski detailed everything he knew about the compound. Guard rotations, the location of Finn's quarters, the building where they kept their weapons. He drew a crude map with his remaining hand once Mac untied him, marking entrances and blind spots. By the time he finished, Ski was missing 3 fingers from his left hand, and Mac had used the tip of his knife to remove the man's right eye when he tried to hold back information. That's all I know, I swear to God, Ski whimpered, clutching his mangled hand against his chest. Blood soaked his shirt, dripping from the empty socket where his eye had been. The other man had passed out from pain and blood loss. Mac studied the map, committing it to memory. Where's Anessa staying? Which building? With Finn. The main house, 2nd floor, east side. Mac folded the map and tucked it into his pocket. He looked at Ski, who was swaying in the chair, face pale from shock and blood loss. Please, Ski whispered. You got what you wanted. Let me go. Let you go. Mac tilted his head. So you can warn them I'm coming? I won't, I swear. You beat my 17-year-old daughter. You laughed while she bled. Mac raised the Glock. No second chances. The shot echoed through the small house. Ski's body slumped in the chair, a neat hole in the center of his forehead. Mac wiped down anything he'd touched, then left through the back door. The other man was still unconscious, but alive. Mac left him that way, a witness who could spread the message. He drove to the outskirts of town, to an old railroad bridge spanning a ravine. The place was deserted at this hour. Mac parked, then opened the trunk where he'd stored Ski's body, wrapped in a tarp. It took less than 10 minutes to secure the corpse to the bridge railing with wire, leaving it hanging for all to see. A message, just as Sable's beating had been meant as a message. But Mac's message was clearer. This is only the beginning. As he drove toward the hospital, rain finally began to fall, washing the blood from the bridge and from Mac's hands. But nothing would wash away what was coming. The war had begun. The discovery of Ski's mutilated body hanging from the railroad bridge sent ripples through Billings. By sunrise, everyone connected to the Blood Crows knew that someone had declared war on them, and they all knew who that someone was. Mac sat in his truck outside the hospital, watching the morning shift nurses file in. He'd spent 2 hours with Sable during the night, enough time to see improvement in her condition, enough time to strengthen his resolve. The doctors had reduced her pain medication, allowing her to speak more clearly. Did you do it? She had asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mac hadn't pretended to misunderstand. Yes, good. That single word from his daughter's broken lips had been all the absolution he needed. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. Mac answered without speaking. You stupid son of a bitch, Sheriff Griggs's voice, tense and hushed. Do you know what you've done? Sent a message, Mac replied calmly. You started a war you can't win. Finn's called in reinforcements from Denver. They're coming for you, Mac, coming hard. Let them come. Listen to me, Griggs lowered his voice further. They found me this morning, want to know what I told you. I covered for you, but they're watching me now. They want your location. And you're calling to warn me? Mac's voice dripped with skepticism. I'm calling because I've got a family, damn it. They threatened my kids, Mac. My kids. Mac considered this. What do they want from you? To set you up, tell you I've got information, get you to meet me somewhere isolated, and you'd do that for them? A pause. I would have. To save my family. Then do it. What? Call them. Tell them I agreed to meet you tonight at my ranch. Griggs was silent for a moment. That's suicide. Not for me. Mac, they'll bring everyone they've got. 20, maybe 30 men. Good. Saves me the trouble of hunting them down. You're insane. No, I'm at war. Mac watched a doctor hurry into the hospital late for his shift. Set it up. Tell them I'll be alone at the ranch tonight, panicking, getting ready to run. They won't believe that. Not after what you did to Ski. Make them believe it. Tell them I didn't expect the fallout, that I'm in over my head. Tell them whatever you need to. Another long pause. You better know what you're doing. One more thing, Griggs. If anything happens to my daughter while I'm dealing with this, I'll hold you personally responsible. I can post a deputy at the hospital. One you trust, not one on Finn's payroll. Done. Mac ended the call. The trap was baited. Now he needed to prepare. He drove to a hardware store in the next county over, where no one knew him, purchasing propane tanks, fertilizer, nails, wire. Basic components for improvised explosives, something he'd learned in Afghanistan. Then to a hunting supply store for more ammunition, a grocery store for food and water, enough supplies to last several days. By mid-afternoon he was back at the ranch, transforming it into a killing ground. The barn was his focus, a large structure 100 yards from the main house, filled with farm equipment he rarely used. Mac spent hours rigging explosives throughout the building, connecting them to a remote detonator. He positioned ammunition caches in strategic locations around the property, established fallback positions, created choke points. As dusk approached, he called the hospital to check on Sable. She was stable, sedated for the night. The deputy was in place outside her room. Good. Mac showered, dressed in black tactical pants and a dark shirt, strapped on his sidearm and combat knife, loaded his shotgun and placed it by the front door, set up his sniper rifle in the upstairs bedroom window with a clear view of the approach road. Then he waited. At 9:38 p.m., the security system alerted him to vehicles approaching the gate. Mac checked the camera feed, 3 SUVs and 2 pickup trucks, driving with headlights off. He watched them stop at the gate, watched men pour out, 21 in total, heavily armed. They cut the lock on the gate rather than try to bypass the electronic system. Smart. They didn't want to trigger any alarms. What they didn't know was that Mac had already disabled that particular alarm, wanting them to think they had the element of surprise. Mac picked up his radio. Deputy Rollins. After a moment, the deputy guarding Sable responded. Here, status? Your daughter's sleeping peacefully. Room secure. Keep it that way. Yes, sir. Mac set down the radio and moved to the sniper rifle. Through the scope, he watched the blood crows spread out, approaching the ranch in a standard flanking formation. Someone had military training, probably Finn. That would make things more challenging. He recognized Bryson among them, the scarred face unmistakable even in the darkness, the man who had put his boot in Sable's face. Mac adjusted his aim, centering the crosshairs on Bryson's head. One shot, and he could begin his revenge right now. But that wasn't the plan. They needed to come closer, all of them. Mac abandoned the rifle and moved downstairs. He flicked on the porch light, then opened the front door and stepped outside, hands empty and visible. I know you're out there, he called into the darkness. You want me? Come and get me. He ducked back inside as bullets peppered the doorframe. Grabbing the shotgun, Mac moved through the house to the back door. Outside, he kept to the shadows, circling toward the barn. He could hear the men approaching the house, their attempts at stealth betrayed by tense breathing and the occasional whispered command. Mac reached the barn and slipped inside through a side door. He positioned himself behind a tractor, shotgun ready, night vision goggles giving him a clear view of the large main door. 5 minutes past 10, then voices outside the barn. He's not in the house. Check the outbuildings. He's here somewhere. The barn door slid open. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness. Anyone see anything? Spread out. Check every corner. 5 men entered, then 3 more. 8 total. Mac waited until they were all well inside, spread out among the farm equipment and hay bales. Then he stood. Looking for me? His voice echoed in the cavernous space. The men spun toward the sound, raising their weapons. It's him! One shouted. Take him down! Mac ducked behind the tractor as bullets flew. He had seconds before they would flank him. He pulled the remote detonator from his pocket and pressed the button. The world erupted in fire and thunder. The explosion lifted the barn's roof, sending it crashing back down in a hail of burning timber. The walls blew outward, propelling nails and metal debris like shrapnel. The men inside had no chance. Those not killed instantly by the blast were crushed by falling debris or impaled by projectiles. Mac, sheltered behind the tractor, was protected from the worst of the blast. Still, the concussion left his ears ringing as he staggered to his feet. The barn was gone, transformed into a roaring inferno. Around him lay the broken remains of men who had helped hurt his daughter. He checked the shotgun, then moved toward the edge of the destruction. The explosion would have disoriented the remaining blood crows, but they'd regroup quickly. He needed to keep moving. Through the smoke and flames, Max saw figures running toward the barn. Perfect. He raised the shotgun and fired. The first man went down. The second turned to run and caught a load of buckshot in the back. "It's a trap," someone shouted. "Fall back." Max circled through the smoke, using it as cover. He found 3 more men huddled behind a pickup truck, arguing about what to do next. "We need to get the hell out of here," one was saying. "This guy's insane." "Finn will kill us if we run," another countered. "Better Finn than this psycho. Did you see what he did to Ski?" Max stepped around the truck. "You should have listened to your friend." They whirled, but too late. The shotgun roared 3 times, and 3 more bodies hit the ground. Mac reloaded, listening. The ranch had fallen silent except for the crackling of the burning barn. He moved toward the house, keeping to the shadows. A figure burst from behind a shed, firing wildly. Mac dropped to one knee, brought the shotgun up, and fired. The man's chest erupted in a spray of red mist. 7, Mac counted aloud, plus 8 in the barn. 15, 6 left, including Bryson. But where was Finn? He hadn't seen the Blood Crow's leader among the attackers. The answer came with the roar of an engine. One of the SUVs burst from behind the house, accelerating toward the broken gate. Mac raised the shotgun, but the vehicle was already too far away. Someone was escaping. Mac let them go. Let them report what had happened here. Let them spread the message, "Don't mess with the Calloway family." He did a sweep of the property, finishing off 2 wounded men he found hiding in the bushes. That left 4 unaccounted for. A noise from the house caught his attention. Mac approached cautiously, shotgun ready. Through the open front door, he could see signs of movement inside. He slipped around to the back, entering silently through the kitchen. Voices drifted from the living room, angry, desperate. "We need to burn this place down with him in it," someone said. "It's the only way." "Finn wants him alive," another voice responded, Bryson's voice. "Says the boss lady wants to deal with him personally." "Screw that. You saw what he did out there. I'm not going back to Finn empty-handed. You want to run? Go ahead. I'll tell him you died like a hero." Max stepped into the doorway. "Neither of you is going back." The 2 men spun around. Bryson was there, along with a younger Blood Crow Mac didn't recognize. Both raised their weapons. Mac fired first. The younger man's head snapped back as buckshot tore through his face. Bryson managed to get off a shot, the bullet grazing Mac's left arm before the shotgun's second barrel caught him in the stomach. Bryson crashed into the wall, sliding down to the floor. Blood poured from a wound in his abdomen, soaking his shirt. He looked up at Mac, recognition and fear in his eyes. "You," he gasped. "Me." Mac lowered the shotgun, drawing his pistol instead. "Remember my daughter, the 17-year-old girl you put in the hospital?" "Business," Bryson coughed, blood spraying from his lips. "Nothing personal. This isn't personal either." Mac raised the pistol. "This is justice." The shot echoed through the house. Bryson's body slumped sideways, a neat hole in the center of his forehead. Mac searched the rest of the house, finding no one else. 18 confirmed dead, 3 unaccounted for, including Finn and presumably Anessa. Outside, Mac surveyed the destruction. The barn was a smoldering ruin, bodies scattered across the property, blood soaked into the Montana soil. Phase 1 complete. Now for the main event. The old Blackburn mine sprawled across 30 acres in the foothills of the Beartooth Mountains. Once a source of copper and silver, it had been abandoned in the 1970s. The rusting equipment and crumbling outbuildings left to decay until Calder Finn recognized its potential. As a base of operations, Mac lay belly down on a ridge overlooking the compound, studying it through binoculars. The main house, once the mine manager's residence, stood at the center, recently renovated with new windows and reinforced doors. Around it clustered smaller buildings, barracks for the men, a warehouse for their product, a garage for their vehicles, just as Ski had described. The attack on Mac's ranch had happened 2 nights ago. As expected, the survivors had fled back to Finn, bringing news of the massacre. Mac had followed discreetly, keeping his distance, using the time to observe and plan. Security had been heightened. Armed men patrolled the perimeter, moving in pairs. Dogs, large Rottweilers and German Shepherds, accompanied some of the guards. In the hills surrounding the compound, snipers kept watch during daylight hours. Mac had counted 22 men, not including Finn and whoever might be inside the main house. Some were clearly veterans, moving with the disciplined precision of trained soldiers. Others were street thugs, there for the money and the violence. All were on edge after what had happened at the ranch. Mac checked his watch. 2:17 a.m. The guard rotation would change at 2:30, the 15-minute window when attention would be divided. He gathered his equipment, a suppressed rifle, his sidearm, a backpack of additional gear, and began making his way down the ridge. The moon was a sliver in the sky, providing minimal light. Perfect. At the base of the ridge, Mac encountered the first hurdle, a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. He removed wire cutters from his pack and made a hole just large enough to squeeze through, then covered his tracks as best he could. The first patrol appeared, 2 men with a German shepherd walking the perimeter. Mac froze, controlling his breathing. The dog would smell him if it got close enough. He reached into his pocket and removed a small canister. Bear mace, effective against dogs and humans alike. When the patrol was 30 yards away, Mac tossed a rock in the opposite direction. The sound immediately drew their attention. "What was that?" one of the guards said, raising his rifle. "Probably just a deer," his partner replied. "Check it out anyway." The first guard moved toward the sound, the dog straining at its leash. Mac waited until they were directly downwind, then slipped from cover and approached the remaining guard from behind. His knife entered the base of the man's skull, severing the spinal cord. Death was instantaneous and silent. Mac lowered the body to the ground, then moved to intercept the first guard. The dog smelled him first, growling low in its throat. "What is it, boy?" the guard asked, turning in Mac's direction. Mac sprayed the bear mace directly in the dog's face. The animal yelped and retreated, pawing at its eyes. The guard raised his rifle, but Mac was already on him, driving the knife into his throat. 2 down, many more to go. Mac moved from shadow to shadow, approaching the compound. When possible, he avoided the patrols. When necessary, he eliminated them silently. A knife to the throat, a broken neck. Each body he hid, buying time before the alarm was raised. 4 guards down, 6, 8. He reached the warehouse, picking the lock with practiced ease. Inside, crates of drugs and weapons lined the walls. Mac planted small charges at strategic points, not enough to destroy the building immediately, but enough to start a fire when detonated. A distraction for later. Next, the garage, same treatment, small charges on the fuel tanks of vehicles. Mac checked his watch again, 3:42 a.m. The lack of radio check-ins from the eliminated guards would soon raise suspicions. He needed to move faster. The barracks presented a different challenge, 2 large buildings housing most of Finn's men, too many to take on directly. Mac crept to the electrical panel on the side of the nearest barracks and cut the power. Immediately, confused voices rose from inside. "Power's out. Check the generator." 2 men emerged from the barracks, flashlights in hand. Mac let them pass, then slipped inside the open door. In the darkness, the remaining men were fumbling for weapons and lights. Mac moved among them like a ghost, knife flashing. Screams erupted as men fell. Gunshots rang out, some striking their own comrades in the confusion. Mac exited through the back door as chaos consumed the barracks. The alarm was raised now, shouting, running footsteps, more gunfire. Mac triggered the charges in the warehouse and garage. Multiple explosions lit up the night, followed by the whoosh of igniting fuel. Flames shot into the sky as vehicles exploded and the warehouse began to burn. Men poured from the second barracks, running toward the fires. Mac picked them off with the suppressed rifle, one by one, from the shadows. But his main target remained elusive. Finn would be in the main house, probably with Anessa, protected, waiting. Mac circled around to the back of the house. A single guard stood at the rear door, nervously scanning the compound as it descended into chaos. Mac put a bullet through his eye, then approached the door. It was locked, but a focused shot destroyed the mechanism. Mac entered, finding himself in a kitchen. The house was silent despite the chaos outside. Soundproofed, probably. Smart. He moved through the ground floor methodically, checking each room. Empty. The second floor, then. Mac ascended the stairs slowly, listening for movement. At the top landing, a man appeared with a shotgun. Mac fired twice, center mass. The man crumpled without a sound. 4 doors lined the upstairs hallway. Mac tried the first, a bathroom, empty. The second, a bedroom, recently used but unoccupied. The third door was locked. Mac backed up and kicked it open, rolling to the side immediately. Gunfire erupted from within, bullets splintering the doorframe where he had been standing a moment before. Mac tossed in a flashbang grenade, turned away and covered his ears. The explosion was deafening, even with protection. Mac entered the room, weapon raised. A man was staggering near the window, disoriented from the flashbang. Not Finn. Mac dispatched him with a single shot, then checked the closet and under the bed. No one. 1 door left. Mac approached it cautiously. No sound from within. He tried the handle, unlocked, too easy. He pushed the door open with the barrel of his rifle, staying clear of the doorway. Nothing happened. Mac risked a glance inside. A large bedroom, luxuriously furnished, and standing in the center, seemingly unafraid, was Calder Finn. "Calloway," Finn said, as if greeting an expected guest. "I was wondering when you'd get here." Mac entered the room, rifle aimed at Finn's chest. The Bloodcrow's leader was younger than Mac had expected, early 40s, fit with the bearing of a career military man. He wore no shirt, revealing a torso covered in tattoos and battle scars. Most notably, Finn held no weapon. "Where's Anessa?" Mac demanded. "Gone." Finn smiled thinly. "She left about an hour ago, said she had unfinished business in town." Mac's blood ran cold. "The hospital, maybe." Finn shrugged. "Or maybe she's halfway to Canada by now. Anessa tends to look out for herself. You sent her after my daughter. I don't send Anessa anywhere. She does what she wants." Finn gestured to the rifle. "Are you going to use that, or did you come here to talk?" Mac lowered the rifle slightly. "You're awfully calm for a man about to die. We're all about to die, Calloway. The only question is when and how." Finn's eyes hardened. "But I'm not going out from a bullet fired by a man hiding behind a gun." In one swift motion, Max slung the rifle over his shoulder and drew his combat knife. "Better?" Finn smiled, a genuine expression this time. "Much." He reached behind him and produced a wicked-looking Bowie knife. "Shall we dance?" They circled each other slowly, knives extended. Finn was lighter on his feet, moving with the practiced grace of a trained fighter. Mac was bigger, stronger, but carrying more years and the fatigue of the night's activities. "You know, I almost respect you," Finn said conversationally. "Coming here alone, taking out my men one by one, that takes balls." "Save your admiration," Mac growled. "You helped beat my daughter half to death." "Business," Finn replied. "Nothing personal." That's what Bryson said before I put a bullet in his brain. Something flickered in Finn's eyes. Anger, perhaps, or fear. Bryson was loyal. "More than I can say for Anessa. Seems you have poor taste in partners," says the man she left. Finn lunged suddenly, knife slashing toward Mac's throat. Mac parried the blow, countering with a strike of his own that Finn barely dodged. They separated, reassessing each other. "You're good," Finn acknowledged. "Military?" "Marines." "You?" "Army Rangers." Finn grinned. "This should be interesting." They clashed again, blades scraping against each other. Finn was faster, scoring a cut along Mac's forearm. Mac responded by slamming his elbow into Finn's ribs, hearing a satisfying crack. Finn staggered back, momentarily winded. Mac pressed the advantage, driving forward with a series of brutal strikes. Finn parried most, but a thrust connected with his shoulder, drawing first blood. "First round to you," Finn gasped, touching the wound. "But I'm just warming up." The fight intensified, both men fully committed now. They crashed around the room, knocking over furniture, smashing lamps. Blood spattered the expensive carpet, sometimes Finn's, sometimes Mac's. Despite the injury to his ribs, Finn was proving a formidable opponent. He fought with the desperation of a man who knew he was fighting for his life, landing vicious cuts to Mac's chest and arms. But Mac fought with something more powerful than desperation. He fought with the cold rage of a father who had seen his child broken. Every blow he landed was for Sable. Every cut, every bruise he received only fueled his determination. Finn tried to create distance, knowing his speed was his advantage. Mac wouldn't allow it, pressing forward relentlessly, absorbing punishment to keep the fight close. "You can't win," Finn panted, blood streaming from cuts on his face and chest. "Even if you kill me, we both know you'll never find Anessa before she finds your daughter." Mac didn't respond. Instead, he caught Finn's wrist as the man attempted another strike, twisting until the knife clattered to the floor. Finn immediately countered, driving his fist into Mac's wounded side. Pain exploded through Mac's body, but he didn't release his grip. Instead, he headbutted Finn, feeling the man's nose shatter under the impact. Finn staggered backward, stunned. Mac followed, delivering a brutal kick to the same injured ribs. Finn went down hard, gasping for breath. "It's over," Mac said, standing over him. "Not quite," Finn wheezed, blood bubbling from his shattered nose. He reached behind his back. Mac saw the glint of metal, a hidden pistol. He reacted instantly, driving his boot down on Finn's wrist. Bones cracked. Finn screamed, the gun falling from nerveless fingers. Mac kicked the weapon away, then knelt, pinning Finn to the floor with a knee on his chest. "We could have been allies, you know," Finn gasped. "With your skills, my connections, we could have owned this state. I already have everything I need." Mac raised his knife. Finn's eyes widened. "Wait, I can tell you where to find Anessa. For real this time. I already know." Mac brought his fist down hard, crushing Finn's windpipe. The Blood Crow's leader thrashed beneath him, face purpling as he fought for air that wouldn't come. Mac watched dispassionately as the life drained from Finn's eyes. There was no gunshot, no dramatic final blow, just the quiet struggle of a man drowning in his own blood. When it was over, Mac stood, wiping his knife clean on the bedsheets. Outside, the compound burned, illuminating the night sky with an orange glow. Most of Finn's men were dead. The few survivors would scatter like rats from a sinking ship. Mac retrieved his rifle and headed downstairs. There was one more stop to make tonight, one more debt to collect. Mac stood in the shadows of the downtown alley where Sable had been beaten. Blood still stained the concrete, his daughter's blood, now turned brown with age. The sight of it rekindled his rage, banking it to a white-hot core. He had called the hospital immediately after leaving the burning compound. Sable was safe. The deputy had reported that no one had attempted to enter her room. Anessa hadn't gone there, but Mac knew where she would be. Not running to Canada or Mexico, not yet. Anessa was too prideful, too vindictive. She would want to leave a message, something for Mac to find after she disappeared. And there was only one place that made sense. The alley where it had all started. Mac checked his watch. 5:47 a.m. Dawn was approaching, the eastern sky beginning to lighten. Soon the city would wake. He needed to finish this quickly. A vehicle approached, the purr of an expensive engine, the crunch of tires on the trash-strewn street. Headlights swept across the mouth of the alley, then died. A car door opened, closed. The click of footsteps approached. Mac melted deeper into the shadows, hand on his pistol. The footsteps paused at the entrance to the alley, hesitant, then moved forward again, more determined. Anessa appeared, a silhouette against the faint pre-dawn light. She wore an expensive coat, her platinum hair gleaming even in the dimness. In her hand was a small object, a phone, its screen casting a blue glow on her face as she checked it. Mac watched her walk to the exact spot where Sable had fallen. Anessa looked down at the bloodstain, then around at the alley walls. She was looking for something, or preparing to leave something. Mac stepped forward, deliberately scuffing his boot against the ground. Anessa whirled, her hand diving into her purse. "Who's there?" "Hello, Anessa." Mac moved into the faint light, gun at his side but visible. She froze, eyes widening, then remarkably she smiled. "Mac, you're alive." Disappointed? Surprised. She eased her hand out of her purse. Empty. "Good choice. I thought you'd be at the compound with Finn. Finn's dead." A flicker of something, fear perhaps or calculation, crossed her face. All of them. Everyone who stayed to fight. Anessa nodded slowly. "And now you're here for me." "Yes. You know me so well." She took a step back. "But you're forgetting something important, Mac." "What's that?" "I'm still legally Sable's mother." Anessa's smile returned, cold and confident. "Kill me, and you'll spend the rest of your life in prison." "What happens to her then?" Mac almost laughed. "You think I care about prison, about laws, after what you did to her?" "It wasn't personal, Mac. It was about the money. It's always been about the money." "Beating a 17-year-old girl wasn't personal?" Mac's voice hardened. "Leaving her for dead in this alley wasn't personal?" "She wasn't supposed to be hurt that badly," Anessa said, taking another step back. "Bryson got carried away. I just wanted to send you a message." Message received. Mac raised the gun. "I've got one for you too." Anessa's composure cracked. "Wait, Mac, please. We can work something out. I'll drop any claim to the money. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." "Too late for that. Think about Sable. She already lost one parent. Do you want her to lose another?" "She lost you years ago," Mac replied, "when you walked out on us for a convicted felon. I made a mistake." Tears appeared in Anessa's eyes, practiced, calculated tears that Mac had seen many times before. "I never stopped loving her. Or you." Mac stepped closer. "You're pathetic, you know that? Still trying to manipulate your way out of consequences. Mac, please." Anessa was openly crying now, backing away until she hit the alley wall. "I'm begging you," like Sable begged. "Did you listen when she pleaded for you to stop?" "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Mac grabbed her by the throat, pushing her against the wall. "No, you're not. You're sorry you lost. Sorry your plan failed. Sorry you're about to die." Anessa's hand shot out, something metallic flashing in the growing light. A small pistol pulled from her coat pocket. Mac caught her wrist, smashing it against the brick wall until the gun clattered to the ground. "Always a backup plan, right, Anessa?" She spat in his face. "Go to hell. You first." Mac dragged her to the center of the alley, forcing her to her knees on the bloodstain, right where she'd left their daughter to die. Anessa looked up at him, hatred replacing the false tears. "Do it then. Prove what a big man you are." Mac pressed the barrel of his gun against her forehead. "This isn't about being a man. It's about justice." "Justice," Anessa laughed bitterly. "You call this justice? This is revenge, pure and simple. No second chances," Mac said quietly. "That's what you told Sable, right?" before Bryson kicked her in the face. Anessa's eyes widened. Mac. The gunshot echoed through the alley, cutting off her final plea. Anessa's body crumpled, falling sideways onto the concrete. Blood pooled around her head, mingling with the older stain of Sable's blood. Mac stood over her for a long moment, feeling nothing, no satisfaction, no relief, no regret, just an emptiness where the rage had been. He tucked the gun away and walked out of the alley without looking back. In the east, the sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of red. A new day was beginning. 3 weeks later, Mac stood on the porch of a cabin nestled in the mountains north of Bozeman. The property was remote, 20 acres surrounded by national forest land, accessible only by a single dirt road, perfect for a fresh start. Behind him, the door opened. Sable stepped out, moving carefully but without the pain that had marked her first days out of the hospital. The bruises on her face had faded to yellow shadows, and the walking cast on her leg would come off in another week. She carried 2 mugs of coffee, offering one to Mac. "Thanks," he said, accepting it, turning back to the view, mountains rising into clouds, a valley spread out below them. "It's beautiful here," Sable said, coming to stand beside him. "Peaceful." Mac nodded. They both needed peace after everything that had happened. The official story was that the Blood Crows had become embroiled in a gang war that had spilled into Billings. Mac's ranch had been caught in the crossfire, destroyed in an attack he'd narrowly escaped. No one questioned why the gang had targeted him specifically. No one connected him to the deaths of Anessa, Finn, or any of the others. There were no witnesses, no evidence pointing his way. Sheriff Griggs had been found dead in his office 3 days after the destruction of Finn's compound, an apparent suicide. His note confessed to corruption, to taking money from the Blood Crows. He'd shot himself in the head with his service weapon, or so the official report stated. The few surviving Blood Crows had scattered, fleeing Montana entirely. The organization was finished, its leadership decimated, its operations in ruins. As for Mac and Sable, they'd used a portion of Augustus's money to start over. New identities, new location, new life. The rest had been donated anonymously to various charities supporting victims of violent crime. "What are you thinking about?" Sable asked, sipping her coffee. "The future." Mac glanced at her. "Your college applications went out yesterday." "NYU," she said, a small smile lifting the corner of her mouth. "Do you think I'll get in?" "I know you will." They fell silent again, watching an eagle soar above the valley. "Do you ever think about them?" Sable finally asked. "Mom? The others?" Mac considered the question carefully. "No, never. They made their choices. They paid for them." He turned to face her fully. "What about you?" Sable touched the scar that ran from her temple to her jaw, a permanent reminder of what had been done to her. "Sometimes. Not because I miss her or anything, just trying to understand." "Some things can't be understood," Mac said gently. "Some people are just broken inside. Like Grandpa?" Mac nodded. "Like Augustus. Are we broken now, too?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "No." Mac put his arm around her shoulders. "Damaged, maybe. Scarred. But not broken." Sable leaned against him, and for a while they simply stood together, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. No words were needed. They had survived. They had each other. That was enough. Eventually, Sable straightened up. "I'm going to start breakfast. Pancakes okay?" "Perfect." She squeezed his hand once, then went back inside, leaving Mac alone with his thoughts. He didn't regret what he had done. Not a single death, not a drop of blood spilled. In the world he had known as a Marine, there were rules of engagement, lines that couldn't be crossed. But when those lines had been crossed against his family, the old rules no longer applied. He had gone to war just as he'd been trained to do, and like every war it had exacted its price, not in guilt or nightmares, but in the knowledge that he was capable of such calculated violence, that such darkness existed within him, ready to be called upon if needed. But as he watched the sun illuminate the valley before him, Mac knew that darkness would remain dormant now. The debts had been paid, the account settled. There was nothing left but to live the life that had been salvaged from the wreckage. Mac finished his coffee and went inside to join his daughter, closing the door gently behind him. In the distance, an eagle cried out, a sound of freedom, of wildness, of life continuing despite everything, just as they would.